We've joined in. Allah will begin then. I've already started talking, but let's begin. So today is the anniversary of the death of Zakhar DUDAEV, the first president of the Chechen Republic of Ичкерия. He died from airstrikes by Russian aircraft, and it was the village of Gikichu. I was right next to the village, in another nearby village, about 70 kilometers away. And I saw the explosions that happened there. They were explosions about the diameter of a 5 or 6 story building. So, Allah were here, and then we didn't know what it was. And right at that moment, Allah DUDAEV was also in OKKUPIROVANNOЙ, but they moved away. But I saw the explosions from the windows. A friend and I were standing in the windows, looking out onto CHECHEN Street, and we saw the explosions. And then, later, the Russian army started shelling all these villages, including the village where we were located. And somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, and there was the place where I was, and this was Zakhar DUDAEV's nephew, Lechi DUDAEV. And we of course had no light. He tugged the door, the hook came off, and he came in. We weren't sleeping, of course, we were sitting. There were 2 other people with me. We were sitting, by candlelight, you could say. He came in, and in the darkness you can't see anything. I, he says, brought bad news. I ask, what happened? He says, Zakhar died. How? Well, it didn't take at all. And how do I ask? He says, well, they hit us this evening and he died. And what are we supposed to do now? We just decided, he says, this. They were all young. And they say, we decided, and without saying anything, not to tell anyone. We had a meeting with you because the Russians will be happy. And so his entire entourage, the ones who were there, all the security, we all decided to bury him secretly and tell everyone that he'd supposedly gone to Georgia. I said, what are you talking about? Who came up with this idea? We all decided together that we're going to do it. I said, we absolutely mustn't do this, because he's been through so much, and now, it turns out, in your opinion, he got scared and left, fled somewhere in Georgia. We absolutely mustn't do this. We must announce it. And so, that morning, it became known. That's how it was. Well, and then everything that happened there, these were the procedures that we went around and looked at. The next day, I went to the place where Al-Assam's dungeon lay. I was sitting at her head, and she took out his socks, the socks he was wearing, the socks in his boots, and sat there sewing them up. And an older relative came in and said to Allah, Allah, don't sew him up, he's not cold. She said, no, he's cold. That's the kind of moment that happened. I'm just telling you about that situation. Allah can tell you about it herself. Well, in a word, I just wanted to delve into that story so you could hear how it was. And all over the Republic, in all the villages of our Republic, people open their mouths. It was, a funeral procession for those everywhere. All the people, when they found out about it, it was, well, something like that. And then, during that period, when I knew many people there, of course, who were around and everything. And now I remember, I saw the eyes of some people and their mood. Several people I knew, were in a completely different mood, not sad, nothing. They started saying, "We've done everything we could. I've paid back everything myself. I didn't do anything." They started making excuses. And this whole situation, well, it was kind of strange to me to watch at the time, but later, it became clear to me that it wasn't a coincidence. That is, some people, who were around us, and who were, of course, recruited, openly or secretly, there were those too. But basically, our entire population, the entire nation, mourned and was very, very upset. This is how it happened, as they say, firsthand. Hello and I'm telling you, Allah, what do you say? Allah is apparently busy with something now. So then, let's start talking about President Jagara DUDAEV's role in the history and development of our state. But it's difficult to overestimate that role. He was the organizer and inspiration behind all the events that were adopted at the National Congress of the Chechen People, which took place from November 23rd to 25th, 1990. It was a National Congress of the Church people. In other words, it was a referendum of the Chechen people, convened from all over the world, starting from America. Electors came here from everywhere. We had this in the old days, too. One elector for every 1,000 people. And about 1,000 people gathered, some 900 odd. And they unanimously decided to recreate our state. And so on. The recreation of a state that was lost during the Bolshevik aggression in 1918 and 1922, when it was incorporated into, the Soviet Union. This mountain republic was fragmented, and they did their best to fragment it as little as possible. And so, at this Congress, a decision was made. It was a referendum. The day after that, on November 27, 1990, a meeting of the Supreme Council of the Chechen English Republics was held, at which a decision was made on, basically the same declaration was adopted, the same declaration, which stated that the Chechen Republic, that is, back then, the Chechen English Republic was a state equal to all other states in the world. That was Article 14, and this was during the Soviet Union. No, everything was fine. This was during the Soviet Union. And after this happened, the Soviet Union authorities didn't interfere. Nothing interfered with us. But at the same time, we saw that the Russian Federation and Yeltsin, they were making noise, adopted their own declaration, in which they stated that they believed their legislation was superior to that of the Soviet Union. And then, these were the very first steps toward, the collapse of the Soviet Union. That is, Rosifer, it was one of the republics of the Union. It suddenly declared itself superior to the Soviet Union. Naturally, we adopted all the other procedures, held elections for the president, parliament, local government bodies, all the trappings, the flag, the anthem, and everything else, and our own government began to operate on our territory. This government was elected by our people, with the free will of their own free will. And up to 30 observers from 30 fearful nations were present then. This was an achievement. of the highest order in the history of our people. And we understood that even in this moment, Moscow, the Kremlin, did not give permission to leave the Soviet Union to any other states, let's say, except for the 3 republics that were Baltic, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Georgia tried then. I remember Ukraine and others wanted to leave, but it was sort of forbidden, because under international law, if permission is not granted, it is considered, well, actually incorrect, not a law against separatism, as it were. That's what ultimately happened. So yes, in this very difficult situation, when after his first inauguration on December 8, 1991, they sent their battalion, or how should I say, they sent a landing party of their soldiers on planes. And this landing force that arrived then in various planes, our people simply went to these airports, to these, where everything they had was moving. And they impeded and simply surrounded these soldiers, disarmed this entire battalion of theirs, and threw them all in prison, even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that is the Ministry of Internal Affairs building. But before that, I want to say one more thing. After that, when we gave it all up, we agreed, because we wanted peace and didn't give up their weapons, but they were handed over to Russia thanks to the position we had. That we needed it, we didn't need a war, let's coexist peacefully. Well, in short, after that, they invaded our territory again in 1992, when they organized this criminal attack again, the Ossetian-Ingush conflict. They quickly dealt with the Ingush people there, throwing them out of their homes and killing them. And then their troops invaded our territory, to a depth of 40 to 50 kilometers. But we already had our troops, our resistance was there, and they were stopped there. Back home, there were fairly lengthy negotiations, and then they withdrew, and left. That was the second Yagris. The third Yagris happened on November 26, 1994, when they invaded from 2 sides, that is, from the north and the south. Their troops invaded, you could say batteries, tanks, invaded our territory, supposedly under the guise of opposition. This opposition was crushed by our resistance and our fighters back then. Our army, so to speak, was just being formed, and they were routed. And Moscow claimed that these weren't their people, that they weren't ours. We don't know who they are, but we forced them, or rather we broadcast them, showed them all over television in Moscow, and here, that Moscow was doing this, everything was pointed there. They saw it and exposed them. Those captains and majors of theirs, who were sitting in the big tanks, named where and who they were, what units, what numbers, everything, who the commander was, they named. So this was, let's say, the second aggression. The third aggression happened on a full-scale scale. On December 11, 1994, Russia invaded from 3 or 4 sides with all kinds of weapons and armaments. And the army that was fighting, it was on Chechen territory until the end of 1996. And according to all the data that they officially and themselves proclaimed on Chechen territory, there was a Russian army of 460,000 men at that time. And this army was defeated. It was incredible because the entire nation stood still. The entire nation stood still. There wasn't a single person who could think or even say anything. Everyone, from the very least to the very top, was against it and did everything they could, helping our soldiers and doing everything they could themselves. And their army was defeated. And in the city of Grozny, they were surrounded. And then Yeltsin sent this General Lebed, who was his advisor on the Security Council, or rather, he was the secretary, to Moscow. And this army that was there, we wanted it to withdraw. We agreed, verbally, that it would withdraw, and then we signed our agreement document. And in these documents of our agreement, there was something. They always tried to deceive us. Write something here, put a comma in the wrong place. Or some other little thing. In the end, the document they signed was so crudely drafted, you could say, in favor of Russia. It even stated that the status would be postponed for 5 years. In reality, they couldn't do that because the signing of this agreement was tied to it. These were people not authorized to do so. Our parliament didn't ratify it, and even the Duma didn't accept it. And so, for more than 2 years after that, we were in a state where we wanted to get back on our feet and sought everywhere, the opportunity to contact the rest of the world, to gain recognition. But Russia obstructed all our efforts throughout the world in every possible way. Wherever we went, they were assisted in this matter. Georgia was the only country then, after we adopted our constitution, that recognized us. And Georgia was recognized by the Supreme Council and the President of Georgia. And our side, in turn, recognized Georgia. This was a very important political and moral, as they say, consensus on Georgia's part. Then, when this happened, our other opponents began claiming that this was non-recognition, that Zviad was no longer president. How could he not be president if they were briefly our guests? Then they all left, went back to the mountains, prepared for Georgia, western Georgia, as far as I know. And there, the president died. So they say he wasn't such a bad guy and all that. And even some Western figures, supporters of course, and some of Russia, are trying to say the same. But we ask, if a legitimately elected president did what he did and continued to do until he died, then his signature is invalid, meaning that the criminal decision to seize power in Georgia was indeed a criminal one. And that criminal Shevardnadze, he, therefore, is legitimate and lawful. So that's the situation then. And ultimately, when all this happened in Georgia, these events that took place, when he died, we, with the help, so to speak, if we wanted, so that they wouldn't abuse him there, brought him here to us in Grozny. And in Grozny we buried the star of Gomtserti. But with this, I will now conclude this story. It could be long. We can talk now about political significance, we can talk about other things. And we have other people here. I would like the Georgian Prime Minister of the time, Bisogushvili, to speak on this matter himself. Please, Beso. And then we will give the floor to Alia. Ah, are you there? Yes. Can you hear me? I can hear you. They are calling. May God grant you life. As long as possible. Hello, dear friends. Hello, Ms. Ala. Hello. I will try to briefly describe the situation in which Dzokhar Musayevich built his state. I specifically mentioned him by his patronymic. Chechens generally don't use patronymics, but to honor his father, who raised such a son, Mr. Musum Kudaye. Now I'll briefly respond to Mr. Idigov's last sentence regarding Gamsapardia's rule. The fact is that Saakashvili's government, the parliament, adopted a special resolution according to which the state bodies of Zeta Gamsapardia were considered legitimate, that is, the duration of their powers, their term of office. That is, according to the most recent resolution that exists in history, it was recognized that Gamsapardia's government was legitimate until the end of his term. That is, when Georgia recognized Ичкерия, Georgia itself recognized that at that time, Gamsapardia was the legitimate president, and the parliament was legitimate. Even our armed guard was a legitimate unit. This eliminated all these structures from prosecution. Before that, everyone in Georgia was persecuted, including me. This search, what is this called, was colored, along with other members of the government, the military, and so on. So the truth is that when the Chechen Republic was recognized, the parliament and President Khalkhifordi were legitimate even by today's Georgian laws. Yes. Next, I'll mention one sentence about one issue I had when I lived in Chechnya for 2 years and worked in DUDAEV's government. I noticed, the first sentence could be described as, hi, surprisingly, but the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria was established. That's something in itself. We talk about war there. But the main thing is that the independent Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, as a state, was established, and that in itself has political value. And I'll try to explain why. Even when I was there and observed everything, traveling through villages, towns, small towns, I often had the opportunity to, meet different people in front of my house. Where in the apartment where I lived at the time, there was a kind of theatrical route that took place there, near the theater. The thing is, and this could happen again someday, there were people, a significant portion, not the majority, but some portion in Chechnya, whose ideology was that Chechnya could not exist as an independent state, that it lacked the necessary personnel, no previous experience, no economic base, no access to the sea. They had a very well-developed ideology, a seriously developed one, which they tried to exploit, of course, to the advantage of the Kremlin, to the effect that it was impossible to build an independent republic of Ичкерия. And when I say that the Chechen Republic has become a state, Everyone gradually became convinced that the impossible had indeed become possible. Another factor that could one day arise is that young people today don't know, the new generation doesn't know, that the Soviet Union was a state founded on ideology, roughly the same as Iran, for example. In other words, the head of state in the Soviet Union wasn't the cabinet of ministers, or the chairman of the council of ministers, or the speaker of parliament, but the first general secretary of the CPSU. That is, the country had a government and a parliament, but the party ruled. And the entire country was subordinated, like a religious dogma. Today, for example, in Iran, it was subordinated to the ideology of communism. The Soviet people built communism. And practically by the time Ичкерия became independent, at least 2 generations had been raised in this ideology, knowing nothing else. In other words, the Soviet Union wasn't led by a president or a prime minister, but by the general secretary of the CPSU. That was typical. China, or even China, isn't like that. Only Iran is now more or less the same. The country wasn't ruled by the Kremlin. It was ruled by the Central Committee of the CPSU, which is now located on, I don't remember what street, not in the Kremlin at all. This is why I recalled that one of the factors driving independence was the fact that a significant portion of people subscribed to this ideology, and they found it so incomprehensible, and they considered it impossible, that Chechnya, such a small country with a population like Moscow, had told them could be an independent state. Not to mention Chechnya, Georgia, and even Azerbaijan, for example, especially, and even Armenia. And Lithuania, where I was. I'm speaking from personal experience. There were many people who didn't believe that these independent republics could exist. It was something so unknown, so incomprehensible, and this made achieving the goal very difficult. So I've touched on many of these issues. I'll just highlight the most obvious, yet sometimes forgotten ones. And so Dzhokhar Musayevich had to fight, not the Kremlin, but this ideology in the minds of people who held deep roots there. Mr. Akhtiat said that one of these Russian forms of aggression was a coup. Every 3 months in Chechnya, in Grozny, there would be a riot. Well, Maidan is the same thing, but there was also a Chechen Maidan. There was some other Maidan where in Chechnya and Grozny, armed people would drive around in armored personnel carriers that weren't subordinate to the state. So the state created a situation where there was an army independent of the state. And so a lot of people would gather at these Maidans, which had slogans like Dzhokhar DUDAEV being a dictator, and that's how it should be, we need democracy, and so on and so forth. Who were they? Mainly, it was the party nomenclatura. I'll finish with this factor, which is to say that the party nomenclatura wielded enormous power. The Soviet Union was governed by the Communist Party, not the Kremlin or any government or parliament. And this party had deep roots in the entire population of the Soviet Union. Every republic had a party nomenclatura. Chechnya also had a party nomenclatura. These people, the Communist Party, were essentially a criminal organization, a mafia, with members of the mafia nationwide. Chechnya had its own local branch of this mafia. And Dzokhar Musayevich DUDAEV had to deal with this organized, highly organized force, which was backed by multi-billion-dollar capital. It's very difficult for anyone today to imagine that the Communist Party possessed enormous financial resources. This wasn't Soviet money, it was party money. They had a huge treasury, and they used it to finance wars and so on and so on and so on. Dzokhar Musayevich also had to deal with this and lead the Chechen people through a very difficult path. And I want to conclude by saying that I regularly watch very good programs hosted by Mr. Akyad and Aslan, always about the war. But in Chechnya, when I was there for 2 years, it wasn't always war. There was also peaceful life. People were getting married, having fun. Grozny was constantly becoming more and more beautiful. It was like they built the waterfalls, the new asphalt, the lawns, the flowers, the parks. People were alive. That's why I say that Chechnya, the Republic of Ичкерия, came into being. And this can be considered some kind of miracle. Not a miracle, but something of a miracle. In such an atmosphere, with such a situation all around, Chechnya came into being. The state came into being. This is important for future generations. It's important to know that the state came into being and could function very well. There was devastation all around the Soviet Union, almost famine, and the market in Grozny had everything. Of course, there were economic difficulties, but what can you do in such a period? Well, and here's another thing that's important now. This ideology, it can be not only political, it can also be religious, as Jan's example shows. And as for Chezgodnya, I guess we could say that this supposedly Muslim ideologization is coming from two directions. It's supposedly religious, and it can sometimes be exploited by certain forces, both in Russia and perhaps in others as well. Musayevich DZHOKHAR managed to overcome and defeat all of this. So I remember with pleasure the living, cheerful Dzokhar, sometimes concerned about the fate of his people, who built a state. This state existed. No one can now say that the Chechen state never existed, and that's impossible. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very good point and very good memories, which many of our young people don't know. and now it's our task to convey to them. And at the same time, this replacement, which is necessary and speaks about how everything developed there, is also true. We will, in fact, talk about this too. Thank you. Besselin. Allah, are you there? Are you there, Allah? Yes, I'm there. Okay, come on, Allah, are we listening? Can you see me or not? You can't see me, but you can hear me. Oh, okay, let it be heard. Let's make it so that you can be seen too. Yeah, I don't know how to do it. Well, turn it on there, where that video is at the bottom, next to this, and the microphone. That's where the sound icon is, right? And there's a camera icon next to it. There. It's not visible yet. Okay, go on, Allah, go on, and then we'll see. Go on.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah, it's 2026 now. DZHOKHAR died in 1996. 30 years have passed since his death. 30 years. But what happened during that time? We witnessed everything that happened. In particular, when does Russia feel anything? I think 3 million people attacked the million-strong Republic of Czechia. And the Chechen people were able to win. It's amazing. It went down in history as a miracle. 1 million Chechens won. 143, or 123. Correct the answer. Millions of Russians, among all the nationalities of the former USSR. And how did Dzhokhar do it? How did he win? He, 1, became kind and tried not to kill. He sat there from March 7 to 9, 1996. All headquarters and units, as well as the headquarters of Russian troops, were surrounded by Chechen fighters. And although earlier, when Russian aircraft bombed the city of Grozny, destroying everything in sight, now they couldn't withdraw from the Air Force, because there are books broadcast by the encircled Russian units saying, "Don't kill. We are alive. Don't kill." And in this way, Dzhokhar forced the Chechen army there to negotiate peace. And besides, Dzhokhar never allowed captured soldiers to be shot. They were held in different units, Chechen troops. And there was an appeal to Dzhokhar DUDAEV, an appeal to Russian mothers to come and take their sons. It was unheard of in history for millions of people to hand over war prisoners without ransom, simply handing over their material. It was such an act of goodwill that the entire world was amazed and astonished by the humanism and kindness of the Chechen people. And perhaps that's why, after the Chechen people's victory, when negotiations took place in Kosayor with the help of General Lebedj, 20 parks, avenues, and streets in various cities around the world were named after Dzokhar DUDAEV. And this was a tremendous honor and recognition of the achievements of the Chechen people, of the entire Chechen people. So I'm coming back again. "30 years have passed, but unfortunately, the Chechen Republic is now occupied because, as Dugin once said, the so-called habitat were brought to Saudi Arabia, and the war, unfortunately, was relegated to religious missions. And we had to temporarily surrender this victory, but only temporarily. I assure you that the best is yet to come. Our Chechen people have a bright future ahead of them, because the Chechens have remained the same. Their character, their traditions, everything has remained the same. And there aren't many traitors. They're at the top, but as soon as the voice of freedom is shared again, as soon as the republics, the former republics, Etostan, Bashkistan, and the Ukraines, begin to liberate themselves, only a few of these traitors, Kalin Kakarov, will be the first to run abroad, and he will be with them. So there will be no more war between the republics. They will simply avoid it. How can I congratulate all of our people? I once again congratulate everyone on the 30th anniversary of the Chin Republic of Ичкерия Захар Duday. And I say, time is on our side. Thank you all, and all the best. Thank you, Allah. Everything you said is very true and correct. I can only confirm this because I was also a participant in those events, and can assure you that it truly was a miracle when the entire people rose up and practically forced that army to bend back then. And its number, I said, was 460,000 people. This is according to their data. They themselves spoke about it. They printed all this during the negotiations, it all sounded. Now, I would like to give the floor to our guests on this issue. Who is who? Let's give the floor to Elhao, our friend and brother, who is in Ukraine. He will tell us he knows all about it. El, please. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. It is an honor to be here. I greet each of you and Ms. Alla Fedorova. Delohara continues. Dzokhar Musaevich, of course. Today, by the way, in Lviv on Dzokhar Musaevich Street, a memorial plaque was unveiled by the mayor in honor of the 30th anniversary of Dzokhar Musaevich's death. But he is always with us. Well, what Mr. Primera said, in the history of the Caucasus, we opened our eyes, we heard about Sheikh Mansour Shamil. Then we heard about Zviada Konstantinovich, who served time in Soviet prisons in Chechenya's Turmovila district in Ukraine. But there was also General Dzokhar Dudaevich Musaev, who knew the strength of the Soviet army, but was unafraid. While our leaders, other more, Soviet republics, were treated somewhat preferentially, as I would say, it's clear that Chechnya was treated differently, how should I say it, or whatever it is in Russian, I've forgotten it for a long time. I haven't spoken Russian in a long time. At the same time, Dzokhar Musayev is a symbol of freedom for all peoples, not just those of the Caucasus. He is revered throughout the world, considered a knight of freedom. A man who knew the Soviet military machine well, knew it very well, who prevented, say, Tartu and promised to close the airspace of the Baltic states. If the Soviet Air Force decides to attack the Baltic states, or rather the Baltic republics, it all becomes history. The Baltic peoples remember this, the Caucasian peoples remember this, but I read something yesterday. My Georgian friend sent it to me. I just want to ask Mr. Djugashvili, Mr. Prime Minister Ivas Akia, are you aware of a certain meeting? So there are such lines in Shevardnadze's memoirs. He writes that I had just become president in June of 1992. I wanted to meet with him. We called. I told him that I wanted to come to Baku on an official visit. He told me that he didn't have time yet. He'll come when I tell him. That's what we agreed on. In his memoirs, he says that I'm coming in 6 months. This was in the winter of 1992-1993. We met with this man in his office. I don't know how true this is. I want us to hear this from people who are more informed. Personally, I, a close associate of Chvabai, know nothing about this. And the speaker, Chvabai, insisted that Dzokhar DUDAEV was in the Secretary of State's office on the floor below. We must create a Caucasian army. We must create a Caucasian home. And he insisted, and we met. How true this is, I don't know, but it's in Shevardnadze's memoir. I didn't know about this until yesterday. Yesterday, my Georgian friend sent it to me. But there was, of course, the dream of Konstantin Zviada Konstantinovich and Chubey and Dzokhar Savich. Of course, building horizontal relations, creating a pan-Caucasian home, creating a pan-Caucasian family, of course, with further say with Armenia, with all the North Caucasian Federative Republics, or whoever would like to be free. Independent republics. Well, what happened, happened. I'm happy to have lived during the time when Dzokhar Musayev came to Baku and unveiled a monument in the Sagotal district. I saw and remembered him and was an advisor to Vyacheslav Maximovich Kornevil, so he always said, if I die on my birthday, on the day of my death, be sure to say something cheerful, because we are the generation that dedicated ourselves to our people. We didn't bargain. So Dzokhar Musayev, in this sense, is a paragon of freedom, I would say. And we are proud. Proud that we lived, as they say, at the same time. And his work continues. In Ukraine, of course, everyone remembers his words. Only when the Ukrainian sun begins to shine will the Russian Empire come to an end. And these prophetic words of his are now happening before our eyes. Thank you very much for being here, for being together, for continuing this sacred work. We have someone to look up to. We also have Dzokhar Musayev, who is a symbol of our struggle, or one of its symbols, a historical symbol, and he is already, well, a legendary figure who truly understood the power of the Soviet army, the power of the Soviet military machine, its terror, but was not afraid. Thank you very much. Much could be said, but this is a topic where, I don't know, it's difficult, because you, the people who were close to him, you, of course, we would like to hear more from you. Thank you. Thank you. And Basari, will you say anything about this? Oh yes, let me explain, please. So first of all, these are memoirs. Not just a memoir. Turn on the TV and you'll hear so many different things from Trump that you'll be surprised. One day, one thing, then another. That is, memoirs are a thankless, noble undertaking. If there were diaries and documents, that would be one thing. And I can recall that I flew to the moon. That is, there will be more fairy tales there than truth. Regarding the Caucasian house, I was actively involved in that matter. I directly drafted the documentation and so on. It's a big question, a complex one. I'm just throwing it out there now. It's a hint, let's say. A hint, yes. How and what was it? And in Sukhumi, the Confederation of Mountain Peoples of the Caucasus was created by the Kremlin. So what do we call the Kremlin? Yeah. It was an armed group designed to wage war on Russia's behalf, disguised as the peoples of the Caucasus. It fought in Abkhazia, meaning the war in Abkhazia against Georgia was waged not by Abkhazia but by the Confederation of Mountain Peoples of the Caucasus. Moreover, the putsch, the final path, this theatrical putsch, was directly led by the formidable Confederation of Mountain Peoples. That is, and only after DZHOKHAR literally dispersed this confederation with tanks, and actually personally participated in dispersing this confederation and his representatives in the Chechen parliament, that is, in the Chechen parliament itself. There were representatives of the Confederation of Mountain Peoples. Did DZHOKHAR more or less begin to govern the parties himself? Before that, there was authority there. That is, the legitimate authority and the authority of the Confederation of Mountain Peoples. So why did I remember this? In the ranks of the Confederation of Mountain Peoples, Zuad and DZHOKHAR attempted to create a Caucasian home, the Piku Confederation, which would unite not only the so-called mountain peoples and the peoples of the North Caucasus, including Abkhazia Ossetia, by the way, but also Azerbaijan and Armenia. This would have been a union of peoples, and peoples at that, not republics. The idea was that small population groups that existed somewhere could also be included here. Well, unfortunately, they worked for about a year and a half. Gathering there, Abkhazians and Armenians came. Armenians met with Azerbaijanis there on the spot, well, to resolve all these conflicts. But the war then prevented this from happening. But the point is that the Caucasian House was created for a reason. So what can I say about this? And there was this, but in fact, this meeting in Baku did take place. Shevardnadze, Elchibey, and I think someone from the Samian side were there. And DUDAEV, when this Caucasian House was being created, proposed that Elchibey be the first to lead this effort. And Shevardnadze didn't like this, naturally. DUDAEV did it for this very purpose, because he knew who Shevardnadze was, and he was very unhappy about it. My Azerbaijani acquaintances who were there at the time also told me about this. I met with them here in Europe. So a meeting of this kind took place at that level. I know whether Ihana answered the question or not. That's how it is. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Prime Minister and to you. Yes, I heard, because he doesn't write anything further in this memoir. He simply wrote that. Yes, it was a meeting in Baku, where they met there and there. That is, they discussed the issue of the Caucasian House, and other issues that Bessarion just mentioned. And I am aware of what happened there. Well, that's the kind of, as they say, dismissal that Shevardnadze wanted to allegedly lead this movement, but since he wasn't trusted, it was primarily he who offered himself back then. That, as they say, was the essence of that meeting. That's how it happened. So, that's it, I know that. Okay, well then, let's give the floor to our Tatar friends, the Kashapovs. Let them speak one by one. Can you hear me? Yes, I can. Ras. Yes, I can. Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. Ikambi also raised this common topic today. And so, in short, we, God willing, will continue to meet like this. And now, dear Allah, in short, I was talking about the past. Indeed, this is a very difficult situation, but despite the difficulties, we continue to fight. Indeed, today we have gathered on this historic day. A truly historic day. Why can I say this simply on behalf of the Tatars? In the past, when Meneshaimi was losing ground, the Tatar oppositionist always, passionately from the podium, from the media, from TV channels, from radio broadcasts, always openly says, take an example from DZHOKHAR DUDAEV. In short, our government structures. This is truly true. It was a very touching moment for us. At that time, the chairman of the talks was Zeki Zainulin, a former colonel in the Soviet Army. He served in the missile forces. He was the chairman of the TOS at the time. He also met with DZHOKHAR DUDAEV. And he personally helped him get an invitation to the Day of Remembrance of the Tatar people. In short, many thousands of Tatars gathered at that time, waiting for DZHOKHAR DUDAEV in Kazan. But we've already talked about it before, but then Boris didn't. Give him this call. If you fly from the Chechen Republic of Ичкерия to Tatarstan, we can't guarantee you a safe flight. After this incident, the Chechen delegation came to the Republic of Tatarstan. They celebrated the Day of Remembrance of the Tatar people together. This shows that all Tatar patriots, not only those living in Tatarstan, but throughout the Tatar world, respect DZHOKHAR DUDAEV. And to this day, he remains in the memory of our Tatar people. Thank you so much for the invitation. May God grant that we, together with the Chechens, Ingush, Dagestanis, and all the colonized people, unite to destroy this Russian Empire. Indeed, this was a very difficult time for the Chechen people. According to various sources, 250,000 people were lost. According to others, 300,000, of which about 45,000 were children. This is a great tragedy. Despite this, the Chechens are still fighting. And may God grant that we liberate ourselves together. Bik Zurakhmat, thank you so much. Tatar Azalak. Freedom! 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 Thank you. This was the prime minister of the Tatarstan government, Ичкерия Shapov. You probably know him. Let's give the floor to our other guest. I don't know if it's the media or if I have poor eyesight. Vitalik. Who is this? Please introduce yourself. Vitalik Peda. Kumik. No. Vitali from Cupid. Please. Yes, I understand who you are. Yes, please. The floor is yours, Vitali. Today is a significant day. We all remember a truly brilliant man, Zakhar DUDAEV. Who made an outstanding contribution, one that will go down in history, both in the struggle for the liberation of the Chechen people and in the struggle against that Russian, Soviet, and now Putin's empire, which is a prison not only for Chechens and English, not only for the peoples of the Caucasus. But for virtually all peoples imprisoned within it, including, of course, the Russian people, who, instead of developing their own national state, are now driven into this racist imperial prison by Putin. I'd like to say that Zakhar DUDAEV, as a phenomenon, certainly ranks alongside the Chechen resistance, the Chechen struggle for freedom and independence that lasted in the 19th century for over 42 years. From 1817 to 1849, and then a series of uprisings in 1877 and 1917. That means it went through the monstrous Soviet genocide and repression when in 1944 the deportations took place under horrific conditions and the transportation of life was horrific. That means more than 500,000 Chechens were men. And according to various sources, between 20 and 30% of the people, the elderly, children, pregnant women, they died in those horrific conditions. And on the road, when they were crammed into those boxcars, without food, without anything, and then, when they were unloaded in the heat of -40°C, that's absolutely horrific. Which, in general, few people have done in history. Well, Putin's people are very offended when they are compared to fascists, but in many respects, their actions exceeded the fascist standards. And then, when people were supposedly given the opportunity to return, it was all still very, so to speak, done very ugly, and they were not allowed to return. In practice, the Chechen people in the Soviet Union were always under suspicion. Therefore, of course, when freer times arrived, and when the opportunity, at least the chance for choice, arose, of course the Chechen people chose freedom, independence, and building their own state, and they did so under the leadership of Zakhar DUDAEV. Under his leadership, people fought for independence, won victories, pushed back the Russian army, and fought against the aggressors. And in this fight, Zakhar DUDAEV gave his life for his people, for their freedom. There are different data, so to speak. Did he manage to say anything before his death or not? Some say he said the fight continues. And therefore, this covenant must be fulfilled. For our freedom and yours. And that means for the freedom of all the peoples now enslaved by Putin and the fascist Russian Federation. Today, 2 Chechen battalions are fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians. One of them bears the name of DZHOKHAR DUDAEV. Mansour is good. And I was even lucky. I ran into one of the men who came to Lev in March of 22. We were driving through Yavrovo together. We met. He talked about his participation in the fighting in Grozny. And he came to finish his life's work. And now, instead of preserving, to fight for the freedom of Chechnya. There is a unit of Namadas from the small peoples of Russia. The Katars, Pashkir, and Kupatov also remembered him today. They too are fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians so that their peoples. I would like to pay tribute to the memory of this bright man, DUDAEV. And I also sincerely hope that his dream, for which he fought his life, for which he gave life, will be realized. That Chechnya will be. You finished? Yes. Yes. And you can. Thank you. Please, please. That is, when this rather insignificant fact of Dzhokhar's visit to Elcheby was encountered, an insignificant fact was encountered there. I was present during the preparation of this question.
And there are 2 directions that, well, can be noted. So the first was that Dzhokhar's goal, which he agreed with SMK, was that Dzhokhar then thought that it was possible to reconcile Juyad with another one. He could not imagine that 2 Georgians could not agree among themselves. This was Junghan's purpose in initiating the meeting with Shevardnadze. He didn't go there to meet with Chebe or to persuade him to somehow make peace with the Gom cult. He did everything, and he was an idealist, thinking it was possible. But Shevardnadze's goal was more interesting. He
came to Kachi and tried to persuade him to invite Aliyev's father, not the one we have now, but his father. He came as Aliyev's agent, trying to persuade Chebe to resign and hand over power to Aliyev, which Elchebe ultimately did. He did it without a fight. Another one explained to him, if you sit there too tightly, let the same thing happen to you as happened in Gontsapurtia. There will be a path against you, there will be bloodshed, and you will be driven out. It's better for you to leave and invite Aliyev. And now that's what he did. He effectively renounced power. Since then, they've built a caliphate there, or something like that. I don't know what it means to be a father to a son there. From the son, they will then pass it on to the granddaughter, or someone, and they built this kingdom there, or something. Well, this is, of course, a very insignificant fact in the history of the Caucasus. Nothing particularly noticed. Yes. They play a significant role in this entire movement. Ah, thank you. And Bezin, that's a good clarification, of course. I didn't know about this, that they were playing such a more subtle game there, it turns out. Okay, then I'll now give the floor to our historian, Isa Akhmedov. Please, Isa, say something. Isa, on your memorable evening, on a memorable day. Zakharovich. Amen. 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 What is Chechnya and what is it? Ичкерия is everything connected with Zakhar DUDAEV, his comrades, his supporters, and those who respect him and know how to move forward. And that you can't rely on them. Understanding on their own, an example is needed. Everything else is Chechnya. After the October counter-revolution, the Bolsheviks created a state that included Chechnya, Chengushetia, and other states that were transformed into republics. This was par for the course. That's how they lived and thought, and then it all ended. I want to give an example to my younger contemporaries. In Grozny, when the leaders were shooting, the troikas were shooting Chechens, Russians, and, well, whoever they came across. They were working there, like in Grozny, on the hilly outskirts. And there, well, these three men are sitting there, and they have nogins, vodka, cucumbers, dory there. Well, they drink everything with their feet. In short, a car pulls up, unloads the people, well, they take them aside, shoot them, and then they tell more jokes. They live a simpler life, like everyday life, nothing special. And when the next group was brought in, shot, they sit. And suddenly there is a groan. From where the pit was, there comes a groan. He heard this Chechenese come up to him once, looks at this little Parchenese, well, how young he is, and groans in pain. He says, "Why are you disgracing yourself?" And he stabbed him with all his might. Then he started drinking even more. This could be Chechnya, which is now Kadyrov. But we don't want any people in Chechnya to be in such a state, when their own people are killed not because you committed a crime, but because you disagree with him. You don't agree that he has the right to finish you off. If it weren't for his wife, who has been through so much, she is going through so much. It's simply impossible to imagine. Then we wouldn't know what was true and what was a lie. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And let's give the floor to our guest who just came in. Konstantin Natalyevich Borovoy. He's from America. Please, Konstantin. Yes, I am very pleased, gentlemen, that you are allowing me to speak with my memories of Drakal Busayevich. We were friends, we discussed a lot of things. Unfortunately, Zakhar Musayev made a serious mistake. In the early days after the Chechen Revolution, so to speak, he relied on Zhirinovsky for help. We discussed this, and he admitted it was his mistake. Zhirinovsky was simply an FSB delegate back then, doing everything possible to prevent the Chechen Republic of Ичкерия from achieving freedom. That's it. By the time I got involved during the war, things were, of course, much more complicated. Yeltsin's entourage was doing everything possible to break and defeat the Chechen people. Fortunately, that was impossible. And the Kosovo Agreement became a fitting end to that struggle for Ichkeria's independence. And serious Chechens themselves contributed to this, as did we, so to speak, Russian Democrats who assisted in this process. And Alexander Lebed and many others. I remember Dzokhar Musaevich with great respect, with love for his wisdom, his desire to advance the Chechen people to independence. I believe it was a heroic deed on his part, a deed for which he had to pay with his own life. Unfortunately, this phenomenon that we are faced with today, Czechism, the Czechists, Putinism, began to fully manifest itself precisely with the beginning of the Chechen War, when the Czechists, these Russian nationalists, tried to subjugate not only the Chechen Republic, but also other national republics. Tatarstan, by the way, Dagestan, that's it. And I sincerely hope that the time will come when the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria will gain independence, and other states worthy of this independence will also gain it. Thank you. Thank you, Konstantin. I would like to say a few words about this, because they said that Dzokhar Musaevich was mistaken. The thing is, I was constantly on edge with my ranks, and I knew all these things you're talking about. We invited Zhirinovsky to the Republic's 2nd anniversary. At the same time, we were looking for ways not only with Zhirinovsky, but also with other deputies and other leaders, including you. A whole group of deputies came to see us, along with leaders who were in the Duma at the time. We met with many of them, talked about the third aggression, the third one, and then a lot of Russian soldiers were arrested. So all these deputies, including Zhirinovsky, all asked for some soldiers to be released to them, so that they could bail them out. We released them, as Allah said, we released them, so that there was no thought, not even in the back of our minds, of taking ransom from anyone or anything. That is, Dzokhar and all of us back then, when we were discussing all this, were thinking about finding some kind of challenge. I had to be in Moscow with the delegation a couple of times. We met at home. I didn't meet you there then. Our delegation, when it arrived, was also looking for ways to resolve this issue. But when we arrived and met, we saw no progress, basically, no concept of seeking some kind of peace and resolving this issue. They wanted to make the Chechen Republic, a precedent for cruelty, brutality, so that the other republics wouldn't even consider it, so that they would start thinking about their independent freedom. I must tell you, Konstantin, You remember well that in 1991, while still part of the USSR, we adopted all the documents, we made the decision, and declared our own state back then, having held elections on October 27, 1991. We wanted to sign this new Union Treaty, which was supposed to be signed when the pistols came out, the Nogachapis came out, and the people lost. This showed that the entire people, even the Soviet Union, were against these purges. And some new things were needed for the people, some new situations were needed, which even Gorbachev proposed. These situations, this line that Gorbachev proposed, were more acceptable. But who opposed it? Yeltsin opposed it with his declaration, which was adopted in June 1990, where he stated that the legislation of the Duma, that is, Russia, is superior even to the Union. So they laid the foundation for the collapse of the Soviet Union. And when they were tearing it apart, even Yeltsin, they said to go in and then reconvene. That is, back then, they were preparing an expansionist plan to seize not only the Chechen Republic, they were preparing to seize all of those republics. They then followed us into Georgia, then again into Ukraine, then again into Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus. This is all clear. That is, the situation there wasn't that simple, and you see it from your side, and I see it from the inside too because I was there at that time. Yes, his last, as they say, until he died. I was the Speaker of our Republic's Parliament. And we remember all of this well, what we wanted to do, what our thoughts were, but we weren't going to submit to the oppression of this barbaric regime that was created, by Yeltsin and his team. They illegally seized all of those republics you mentioned, Tatarstan, Bashkistan, Dagestan. They seized them all illegally. And why? Because what they did then was connected to the fact that they didn't elect these republics when they left the Soviet Union. They were supposed to elect their own leadership and determine their own policy, but they weren't allowed to. They took this federal treaty, signed by President Yeltsin and former communist leaders illegally, bypassing their will. Tatarstan and others, they didn't listen. They didn't elect the legitimate authorities, as they had, because their status had been elevated. Their status was elevated back in April 1990 by three laws of the USSR. And these three laws of the USSR elevated the status of all autonomous republics to the Union. Look at the law of April 26th. Take it up, look. And even in this case, they obstructed it. The Chechen republics succeeded. And so we were a kind of example of how we didn't leave the Russian Federation, as they left the Soviet Union, because we resolved that issue then. And after leaving the Soviet Union, we adopted your constitution on March 12, 1992, already within the international legal framework. And on March 13, Georgia recognized our republic. Before that, it hadn't recognized us, saying, "You're completely your own," as they say. You have your own attributes. You could have gone all the way, but no. We did that. And Georgia recognized us on March 13, 1992. We in turn recognized Georgia. So it was precisely us who were blamed. Now, Mr. Prime Minister of Georgia, Bessarion Gushin, told us about this. More precisely, we then decided, like Gonsard was illegal, all that stuff. No, it was legal. If it had been illegal, almost 90% of the population would not have elected its presidents. And that criminal element that Shevardnadzor sent from Moscow, they were supposedly legal. That's not true. Moreover, he went there, to Georgia, and suffered there, well, as they say, in this regard, in battle. He, in fact, perished. And after Saakashvili came to power after Shevardnadze, their parliament passed a resolution declaring all decisions made during his entire term as legal and justified. In other words, Georgia essentially confirmed its recognition of our state. What I'm trying to say, Konstantin, is that this issue can be interpreted in different ways. Therefore, I wouldn't want to unequivocally, as you said, say that Dzokhar was wrong. Dzokhar, as a living person, could have made mistakes in, say, minor matters. But he was right about the main things. He was searching. And we all searched for solutions to this problem. Because we built our state, which the Russian Federation failed to build, in accordance with international law, within the framework of international law. Russia criminally created this state, executed its Supreme Soviet, and then, illegally, adopted a constitution, also by public consultation, and then added the Chechen Republic of Russia into it. And so we renamed our republic the Chechen Republic of Ичкерия on January 16, 1994. In other words, everything was aimed at recreating this empire. Yeltsin, let's say, and his imperial team were once again in power in this empire. You understand this well, Konstantin. So here, in these issues we're discussing, we need to take all of this into account. Thank you. Isa, could you, please, clarify? I was there, so to speak, on the spot twice with Mr. Yaranovsky. It was a warm feast, you know, we drank and drank. Yes. But the essence of the matter was that during one meeting between DUDAEV and DZHOKHAR, Comrade Zhirinovsky was discussed. And I'll briefly summarize the essence of that conversation. So when a person is in prison and wants to give a message to someone, they have no other way to convey it, except through the prison guards. There's no one else there. So a message can only be conveyed through the guards. It's true that Chechnya was under an information blockade. Zhirinovsky was used as this prison guard, who would transmit messages, about close conversations. DZHOKHAR called him a clown among themselves. So the clown was used to convey messages outside, where there was no one, as if he had been sent. He would then come to Moscow, appear on television, be shown, say something, and this, to a certain extent, broke the information blockade. Well, today we also see people like Vitkov and others driving back and forth, doing nothing. They deliver a message, bring it back, deliver it again, bring it back again. That's it. So it wasn't that DZHOKHAR didn't understand Comrade Zhirinovsky. That's one thing. And secondly, what was his, Comrade Akhtia just told us. After our government was forced to take refuge in Chechnya for a while, we returned to Georgia. We returned to Georgia, all of western Georgia, and then, in collusion with Washington, they sent the entire Black Sea Fleet against us, led by the Admiral of the Baltic, the entire Black Sea Fleet. So, all the might that Russia had in the Black Sea at the time, including a division. I don't remember the internal division. Where were the Cheka troops that were there? Plus they sent these. And on top of that, there were about 150,000 Russian troops stationed in Georgia at the time. Russian bases were in Georgia at the time. So Gamsa fought against Shevardnadze, against the Russian troops that were in Georgia. Plus, they sent the Baltics, that is, the Black Sea Fleet, arrived in Poti. The entire Black Sea Fleet arrived in Poti. This was at a time when there were 1,200 armed soldiers in Gamsa. So, Gansakuria's advance toward Tbilisi and the return of legitimate power was stopped not by Shevardnadze, but by the invasion of these Russians. And by the way, there were Ukrainian troops. Ukraine was also present, and Armenia too had armed forces. They invaded Georgia and fought directly with armed forces. Gamsa was defeated not by Shevardnadze, but by Bolton's expeditionary force. This is well documented. And then, as a gift, Shevardnadze gave Comrade Bolton $250,000, which, according to Comrade Bolton, the chess champion brought it as if they had dragged it in. She personally appeared on television many times, telling how she gave the bribe to Baltzi. That is, the situation was such that Zahuria returned to Georgia. The legitimate government began to restore Georgia, and they reached Kutai. In other words, all of western Georgia was already in the hands of the legitimate government. And this advance was interrupted only by the invasion of Baltzi's expeditionary force, which provided, well, incomparably more assistance than all of the troops from the entire Caucasus could muster. A clarification about Comrade Zhivanovsky. Well, he was such a funny man. Yes. Well, thank you, Basarian, thank you for that. Okay, we still have some speakers left, our young people. Let's give them some more to speak. Eslan, thank you, Mr. Constantin. Thank you, Mr. Baron, for providing such information for consideration. Yes, we are simply discussing this situation with various parties here, and we are watching. On the one hand, we can see what they're thinking in Moscow, but on the other hand, we see things from the inside. Thank you both, of course. And, Aslan, please give the floor to you. Aslan Artsuyev. Yes, greetings to everyone. Yeah. Marsha Uel. I offer my sincere condolences on the 30th anniversary of Dzokhar Dudaev's death. The vile treachery, the treacherous assassination by the Russian Empire of the President of the Chechen Republic of Ичкерия, who was supported by practically the entire Chechen people who fought for their freedom. I heard this news along with my leader, Dzokhar Dudaev, on the radio in a taxi in St. Petersburg. When I heard it, it seemed like night had fallen. It was very, very painful. This is how all Chechens felt. All who had so much hoped, believed that Dzokhar would lead us out of this struggle as victors. But it seemed, at first, that all might be lost, all was lost. But life has shown that Dzokhar Dudaev's idea wasn't his own, not personal. It was a centuries-old one. And throughout their history, Chechens have fought not only against the Russian Empire, but always against conquerors, against occupiers. And the struggle continued. It didn't end. It became even more severe, as DZHOKHAR predicted. It took on very harsh forms. But despite this, despite the fact that Russia employed every possible and impossible method and means, while practically the entire world helped it, some with tacit consent, others with complicity, and so on, the Chechen people persevered, survived, despite what many had already thought. There's a certain figure, Kashman, who said that the Chechens would be different. After this war, there will be Chechens, of course, but they will no longer be the same Chechens, said the rootless nightmare, who, if he had a family, would probably never have even thought of such a thing. But, as the esteemed Alla Fedorovna said, the Chechen people have not changed at all. The Chechen people have become stronger. We have learned a lot, we have seen a lot. You. And, of course, we miss DZHOKHAR. DZHOKHAR was not just a president, he was a leader. A leader whom everyone loved, respected, and even his enemies. Today we see that Ukraine, which is also fighting for its freedom, and today I see on Facebook that many Ukrainians are posting news about the 30th anniversary of DZHOKHAR DUDAEV's death. And we see that the cause of freedom, the cause of DZHOKHAR DUDAEV, among other things, lives on, and as we see, is not going to lose or retreat. Therefore, I express to Alla Fedorovna, Ali, my sincere condolences. Dale, Gaza has given me a blast. I express my condolences to all the Chechen people. Well, I urge you to continue, not to give up, to keep fighting. Something like that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We also have guests from Tatarstan and a friend of our friend Kashapo. Please, if he wishes, we will give him the floor. Good evening. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Good evening. Thank you very much for organizing this. This is a significant date in the history of the Chechen people, because DZHOKHAR DUDAEV was a true leader. He was a worthy man who lived for his people. And he remained in history as a worthy son of the Chechen people. Ah, kind, sincere, yes, obsessive. Even when you watch interviews, yes, here's his old interview, yes, you immediately see that he was a very open, sincere, kind, truthful, honest person. Yes, when he always told only the truth. Here in all his interviews, here I am, I've watched so many interviews, and I noticed precisely this factor, the truthfulness in him. Yes, the fact that the man truly, honestly said what he thought, even though he was afraid to speak up. So of course, it's a great pity. Today is such a tragic date, and this is a loss for the Chechen people, because such people are born very rarely. And he is an example for us, yes, for us to be a worthy person, to be proud of, right? And so, I am confident that the proud, freedom-loving Chechen people will definitely gain freedom, will definitely restore independence, yes, of their state of Ичкерия, because Russia is truly an empire, yes, it is unviable, it will fall apart anyway, so sooner or later this moment will come, and all the liberated peoples will gain freedom, including the Tatars, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, and other republics, yes, national republics, and even, perhaps, other regions, territories, areas that no longer want to be with Moscow, yes, in one state. So it was very interesting. Listen to you. Thank you very much. It is, pleasant, yes, to be in such a company of respected people, yes, to be present. And it is very interesting to name many such historical facts, yes? So thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much. I wanted to say a few more words about what we have expressed here. And today marks 30 years since the death of our leader. He truly was the leader of our people. He was an example for everyone. And besides, he was such a person, like an eagle. He could inspire people, he could tell them, and moreover express his thoughts very simply and clearly. And people followed him. Everyone loved him. That's what he was. But his enemies did not like him. And besides, I can say that he was not, some kind of nationalist or anything else. He even had a Russian wife. You see? That's the thing. It spoke about who he was. He was not against, say, the Russian people as a whole, although in general many Russians are they're downtrodden beyond measure. They don't understand what's happening and what's happened to them for many, say, a century. That's clear, many. But there are also people among the Russian people who stand for the principles that could give personal freedom, liberty, and independence to the individual. We're fighting for this. We're fighting so that we can be, say, not second, third, or fifth class people, but equal people. That's what we fought for. Now today, we're fighting to liberate the territory of our state, which was created entirely within the framework of modern law. No one will undermine, as Zhaga and Nosov said, everything has been done so precisely. And now that it's occupied, we are seeking and will continue to seek its liberation in order to restore our Constitution and our power there. All those who deviate from this line are enemies of our people, whether they understand it or not. And at the same time, they are supporters of Putin's empire, who is committing this very crime all around, against his own people and against everyone around him. Him, and even further. Allah, will you say something in conclusion? If you say, please Allah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Will you say it? Yes, yes, can you hear me? Yes. Yes, yes, you can hear me.
I want to say that DZHOKHAR was not alone. After him, they fought and died. The Russian agent Ramkhan, Aslan Maskadov, and 2 more presidents. In total, 5 presidents died. Well, the future, the bright future, is not fading. Zuka said while dying, when he was dying in the arms of Music Idig, he said, finish the job. I am sure that the Chechen people will finish this job. My hope is for the youth, for the boy who spoke last, and for his friends, and for those who are with them, and for those who listen to us, for all Chechens. The old lead by example, the young fight. May Allah grant that we all win. All the best to you, and thank you for speech to everyone who spoke and addressed me and the Chechen people. A huge thank you to Artsakh and to everyone, glorious everyone. Thank you, thank you. But let's end this rally of ours today, let's say, or conference, with the words, Glory to Ukraine, glory to Uchri, glory to all peoples who strive for freedom and independence. Ukraine will win. This is a guarantee without success that other, say, peoples will also gain freedom. Russia itself, I think, can transform itself, reform itself on the foundations that lie in individual freedom and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then everything will be completely different. Otherwise, complete destruction is destined for Russia. I think so.
Well, on this I say goodbye. I thank everyone again. Everyone who spoke here spoke. If I offended anyone, please forgive me if I offended anyone. But I also spoke sincerely. Thank you, goodbye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye. M.